Welcome to LinesToGo installation videos. Today we will be removing and installing brake lines on a 2010 Mercedes GLK350 using LinesToGo part number BLMB-103-SS. While this particular installation is being performed on a 2010 GLK350, this set of lines will also fit the following year, make, and models as shown on your screen now. LinesToGo lines are made using original equipment end forms and fittings that are CNC bent for an easy and precise installation. We have also upgraded to stainless steel braided Teflon hoses for rust protection and to prevent surface fouling. These have an unlimited shelf life and anti-static PTFE liner. This set of LinesToGo lines are made using 304L stainless steel for rust resistance that exceeds OEM standards. Tech tip: disconnect the battery before working on a vehicle to reduce the risk of shorting out the battery on tools or lines. LinesToGo lines are made with a sectional design for easier installation. We also use color-coded unions on our sectioned lines. Just match the colors at the connections. Tools required: T25, T45, 8mm, 10mm, 13mm, and 17mm sockets and ratchet, 8mm, 10mm, 11mm, 12mm, and 13mm wrenches, pliers and cutting pliers, pick, flat blade screwdriver, drain pan, jack and jack stands. The level of difficulty for this installation is considered to be medium. Remove the plastic cover over the battery by removing the 3 clips on top. Use a 10mm wrench to disconnect both battery terminals. Remove the front section of the plastic engine cover. Remove the 2 intake tubes from the front of the engine. Remove the rear engine cover from the vehicle. Remove the 3 sections of weather stripping located at the rear of the engine. Remove the driver's side electrical connector from the ECU located on top of the engine, along with the other 2 connectors in the harness. Remove the harness from the engine shield and position it off to the side. Use a T25 socket or screwdriver to remove the 2 screws on either side of the engine that secure the rear cover. Remove the cap from the coolant surge tank. Raise and support the vehicle. Using an 8mm socket, remove the screws that secure the front lower cover underneath the vehicle and remove the cover. Loosen the plastic drain screw on the driver's side of the radiator to start to drain the coolant. Draining the fluid into a clean jug will allow it to be reused later. Tighten the screw once it stops draining. Pull up on the locking clip that secures the coolant hose at the rear of the engine shield. Separate the connection and remove the section from the shield using a screwdriver or pick to push in the plastic tabs. Remove the bolt at the rear of the engine shield using a 13mm socket. Lift up on the rear engine shield to remove it from the vehicle. Use an 8mm wrench to remove the 2 nuts that secure the heat shield on either side of the engine. Use a 13mm socket to remove the 2 bolts that secure the battery and remove the battery from the vehicle. Using a T45 socket, remove the 3 bolts that secure the battery tray and remove the tray from the vehicle. Push in on the 4 plastic locking tabs located on top of the battery jump start post to remove the cover. Using a flat blade screwdriver, pry back on the 2 locking tabs and pick up on the jump start housing to disconnect it. Position it aside. Remove the plastic covers that secure the lines on top of both strut towers. Pull out on the 2 locking tabs located on top of the surge tank and lift up on the tank. Disconnect the two electrical connectors and position the coolant surge tank aside. Use an 11mm and a 12mm wrench to remove all 6 threaded fittings from the ABS module. The two larger lines will not be replaced but will need to be disconnected to route the other lines around them. Using a pair of cutting pliers, cut the right front line in the center behind the throttle body. Remove the line from the plastic retaining clips at the firewall. Using a pair of pliers, remove the spring clamp that secures the coolant return hose to the plastic connection and remove the hose. Remove the driver's side section of the right front brake line from the vehicle. Using a 17mm socket, remove all 4 wheels from the vehicle. Remove the plastic push clips that secure the front inner fenders using a flat blade screwdriver. Remove the plastic nuts using a 10mm socket. Remove the front portion of both front inner fenders, along with the rear section of the driver's side front inner fender. Remove the plastic retaining clip from the lines. Using an 11mm wrench, remove the threaded fitting from the right front flex hose. Remove the passenger side section of the right front brake line from the vehicle. Using an 11mm wrench, remove the threaded fitting at the left front flex hose. Remove the left front brake line from the vehicle. Remove the rear lines from the plastic clips located inside of the left front inner fender. Use a 10mm socket to remove the nuts that secure the driver's side plastic cover underneath the vehicle and remove it. Use a 10mm socket to remove the plastic nuts that secure the left rear inner fender. Remove the plastic push clips and remove the left rear inner fender from the vehicle. Use a 13mm socket to remove the 2 nuts that secure the driver's side section of the fuel tank in position. The fuel level of this vehicle was very low, so a support was not needed, but we do suggest that you place a support underneath the fuel tank so it does not hang too low and risk causing damage due to the weight of the fuel inside of the tank. Now reach above the side of the fuel tank and remove the lines from the plastic clips. Remove the rear lines from the plastic clips on top of the rear subframe by reaching through the left rear inner fender. Remove the threaded fitting from the left rear flex hose using an 11mm wrench. Use a pair of cutting pliers to cut both rear lines at the center of the vehicle and remove the rear section of the left rear brake line from the vehicle. Remove the front section of both rear brake lines from the vehicle. Use an 11mm wrench to remove the threaded fitting from the right rear flex hose. If the line is seized to the fitting, you can cut the line and remove the fitting using a socket later. Remove the right rear line from the plastic clips above the rear subframe. Remove the rear section of the right rear brake line from the vehicle. To begin the installation of your new LinesToGo stainless steel brake lines, start by installing the rear section of the right rear brake line labeled 06B into position, routing it over the top of the fuel tank. Start the rear threaded fitting into the right rear flex hose by hand. Secure the line into the plastic clips above the rear subframe. Next, install the front section of the right rear LinesToGo brake line labeled 06A into position and secure it into the plastic clips. Start the front threaded fitting into the front horizontal port in the ABS module by hand. Connect the front and rear sections using the supplied union noting the LinesToGo color-coded connection. Tighten the union using a 12mm and a 13mm wrench. Tighten the fittings in the ABS module and the rear flex hose using a 12mm wrench. Next, install the rear section of the left rear LinesToGo brake line labeled 05B into position, routing it over the top of the rear subframe. Start the rear threaded fitting into the left rear flex hose by hand. You can now use a 13mm socket to replace the two nuts that secure the driver's side section of the fuel tank into position. Next, install the front section of the left rear LinesToGo brake line labeled 05A into position and secure it into the plastic clips. Start the front threaded fitting into the top forward central port in the ABS module by hand. Connect the front and rear sections using the supplied union, noting the LinesToGo color-coded connection. Tighten the union using a 12mm and a 13mm wrench. Tighten the fittings in the ABS module and the rear flex hose using a 12mm wrench. Next, install the driver's side section of the right front brake line labeled 04A into position. Feed the passenger side section of the right front brake line labeled 04B into position. Start the threaded fittings at the ABS module and the right front flex hose by hand and tighten using a 12mm wrench. Tighten the threaded union behind the engine using a 12mm and a 13mm wrench. Next, install the left front LinesToGo brake line labeled 03 into position and start the fittings into the ABS module and the left front flex hose by hand. Tighten both fittings using a 12mm wrench. Tighten the primary and secondary brake lines back into the ABS module using a 12mm wrench. Bleed all four wheels using an 11mm wrench. Make sure to keep the master cylinder reservoir topped up with fluid. Replace the lower plastic cover and tighten the plastic nuts that secure it using a 10mm socket. Replace the left rear inner fender and both front inner fenders using a 10mm socket to tighten the plastic nuts. Replace all four wheels using a 17mm socket to torque to the manufacturer's recommended specification. Install the front lower guard and tighten the bolts using an 8mm socket. Replace the two electrical connectors on the surge tank and reposition it onto the strut tower. Replace the battery jump post and install the plastic cover. Install the battery tray into place and tighten the bolts using a T45 socket. Install the battery back into position and tighten the hold down clamp using a 13mm socket. Install the overflow tube back into the coolant connection and replace the spring clamp. Replace the rear engine shield back into position and tighten the two screws using a T25 socket. Using a 13mm socket, replace the bolt at the shield behind the engine. Replace the coolant connection, making sure the spring clip is secured. Replace the wiring harness at the rear of the engine shield along with the 3 pieces of weather stripping. Plug in the 3 electrical connectors. Replace the 2 nuts using an 8mm wrench. Replace the rear engine cover, making sure it is seated around the throttle body at the rear of the engine. Install the 2 intake tubes along with the front engine cover. Replace both battery terminals and tighten with a 10mm wrench. Replace the plastic cover over the battery. Start the engine and top up the coolant. This concludes the installation of stainless steel brake lines on a 2010 Mercedes GLK350 using LinesToGo part number BLMB-103-SS. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions or would like to purchase the lines you saw today, please call us at 1-855-781-5992. Email us at info@linestogo.com or check out our website link below. Don't forget to take advantage of our free next day shipping. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button below, and we will see you in our next video.